They made this puppy carry 100 pounds every single day for tourists. But when a park ranger saw what was really happening, he didn't just step in, he called the FBI. What looked like cruel tourism was only the beginning. Behind the puppy's broken body was a secret so dark, it could bring down powerful men who thought they were untouchable. The ranger risked everything to uncover the truth, but with money, corruption, and danger closing in, saving one puppy could mean losing everything. What hidden crimes did he stumble into? And how far will he go when the lives of the innocent hang in the balance? I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Type it down below. And while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the canyon, overlooked as Hoyt McCrae leaned against the weathered wooden railing, scanning the winding trail below. 20 years as a ranger had taught him to notice details others might miss. A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of pine needles and desert sage, while red-tailed hawks circled lazily overhead. The peaceful moment shattered when he heard it, a sound that made his stomach turn. A pained whimper, followed by labored breathing. Hoyt straightened, his experienced eyes quickly finding the source. What he saw made his blood boil. A small German shepherd puppy, barely old enough to be away from its mother, stumbled under the weight of an enormous tourist pack. The pack towered over the pup's tiny frame, clearly weighing almost as much as the animal itself. "Dear Lord," Hoyt muttered, his jaw clenching. Two men in matching company polo shirts emblazoned with Canyon Adventures Tours walked ahead of the struggling animal, deep in conversation and paying no attention to the puppy's distress. Without hesitation, Hoyt strode down the trail, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Hold up there!" he called out, his voice carrying the authority of his position. The men turned, startled by his approach. The taller one, sporting a goatee and sunglasses, spoke first. "Something wrong, Ranger?" Hoyt pointed at the puppy, who had collapsed the moment they stopped walking. "That animal is carrying a 100-pound pack. She's just a baby, for heaven's sake." "Company property," the shorter man said with a shrug. "We're training her early. Makes them stronger." Hoyt's weathered face darkened with anger. "No, what you're doing is cruel. That pack could permanently damage her spine." He knelt beside the puppy, who looked up at him with exhausted brown eyes. Her pink tongue lolled out as she panted heavily, her sides heaving with each breath. "This isn't your concern, Ranger," the taller man said, his friendly demeanor slipping. "We have permits for our operation." "Your permits don't cover animal abuse." Hoyt's fingers worked quickly to unbuckle the oversized pack. The puppy whined in relief as the weight lifted from her shoulders. "I'm confiscating this animal under suspicion of cruelty." Both men stepped forward threateningly. "You can't do that," the shorter one growled. Hoyt stood to his full height, one hand resting meaningfully on his service belt. "I can, and I am. You're welcome to take it up with the Park Service office." His voice was quiet but carried steel beneath the calm exterior. The puppy, freed from her burden, pressed against Hoyt's legs, trembling. He could feel her rapid heartbeat through his uniform pants, and his resolve hardened further. "This isn't over," the taller man warned, pulling out his phone. "Mr. Cade will hear about this." "I'm counting on it," Hoyt replied evenly, though his gut tightened at the name. Everyone in the county knew Bromley Cade, the man who'd turned a small outfitting business into a tourism empire. His influence reached deep into local politics and law enforcement. The men retreated up the trail, leaving Hoyt alone with the exhausted puppy. He knelt again, running gentle hands over her body, checking for injuries. Her muscles quivered beneath his touch, and he found several spots where the pack had rubbed her fur raw. "It's okay, little one," he murmured, letting her lick his hand. "You're safe now." It took less than 30 minutes for the sleek black SUV to appear in the parking lot below. Hoyt watched from the overlook as Bromley Cade emerged, his expensive boots kicking up dust as he strode toward the trail. Even from a distance, Hoyt could see the calculated smile on the man's face. Hoyt stayed where he was, the puppy now curled up in the shade beside him. He'd seen enough predators in his life, both animal and human, to recognize one approaching. Cade climbed the trail with the ease of someone who spent more time in boardrooms than wilderness, but his casual demeanor couldn't hide the predatory grace in his movements. Ranger McCrae, Cade called out as he approached, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. Lovely afternoon, isn't it? He carried a leather portfolio under one arm, his other hand extended in greeting. Hoyt didn't take it. Mr. Cade, I understand there's been a misunderstanding with one of our training animals. Cade's smile never wavered as he lowered his hand. I brought the relevant paperwork showing our ownership and proper permits. He patted the portfolio. No misunderstanding, Hoyt replied. Your men were abusing this animal. She's 6 months old at most, carrying a 100-pound pack in 90-degree heat. Cade's eyes hardened slightly, though his smile remained. We have very specific training protocols, Ranger McCrae, all approved by licensed veterinarians. That puppy represents a significant investment. Investment? Hoyt's voice was quiet but sharp. Is that all she is to you? Everything's an investment, Ranger. Time, money, relationships. Cade opened his portfolio, removing several official-looking documents. Speaking of relationships, I have an excellent one with your supervisors. In fact, I just got off the phone with Regional Director Stevens. He suggested we handle this internally. The threat was clear, wrapped in political politeness. Hoyt had seen this dance before, powerful men using money and connections to bend rules until they broke. The puppy pressed closer to his legs, as if sensing the tension. The law's clear about animal cruelty, Hoyt said firmly. The law? Cade chuckled, the sound without warmth. The law is like this canyon, Ranger McCrae, full of different paths and interpretations. I'm trying to offer you an easy trail here. Return the animal, we forget this happened, and everyone goes home happy. Hoyt looked down at the puppy, who gazed back with complete trust in her brown eyes. He thought about all the times he'd looked the other way in his life, convinced himself that fighting the system was pointless. Not this time. No, he said simply. Cade's smile finally faded. No? That's right. No. Hoyt met the other man's gaze steadily. I'm filing an official report. The puppy stays in protective custody until this is properly investigated. You're making a mistake, McCrae. Cade's voice dropped to a near whisper. I own half this county. One phone call, and your seasonal position disappears. Another call, and you won't find work in any park in the state. Probably true, Hoyt admitted, but I'll still be able to look at myself in the mirror tomorrow morning. They stood in silence for a long moment, the canyon winds whistling between them. Finally, Cade slipped the papers back into his portfolio with deliberate movements. This isn't over, he said, echoing his employee's earlier threat. No, Hoyt agreed quietly. I don't suppose it is. He watched as Cade descended the trail, his expensive boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. The puppy whined softly, and Hoyt knelt to scratch behind her ears. Come on, girl, he said softly. Let's get you some water and food. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As he gathered the puppy in his arms, Hoyt knew he'd just made a powerful enemy. But looking into those trusting brown eyes, he couldn't find it in himself to regret it. Sometimes, he reflected, the right path was the hardest one, but that didn't make it any less right. The sun was setting over the canyon rim as Hoyt carried the puppy to his Ranger truck, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but for now, he had a small life to protect, and sometimes he knew that was enough to make all the difference in the world. The veterinary clinic sat at the edge of town, a modest single-story building with a weathered sign that read, Mobile Veterinary Services Dr. M. Vega. Hoyt pulled his Ranger truck into the gravel parking lot, the puppy curled up on a blanket in the passenger seat. The evening sun cast long shadows across the building's faded white exterior. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and pet shampoo. A bell chimed as Hoyt entered, the puppy now cradled in his arms. Dr. Marisol Vega emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on a towel. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her keen eyes immediately focused on the puppy. What do we have here? She asked, already moving forward to examine the animal. Found her on the canyon trail, Hoyt explained. Cade Outfitters had her carrying a 100-pound pack in 90-degree heat. Marisol's expression darkened. Bromley Cade, I know him. Set her down here. She patted an examination table. Hoyt gently placed the puppy on the cold metal surface. The dog whimpered slightly but stayed put. Her trust in humans somehow still intact despite her ordeal. Marisol's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking vitals and looking for signs of distress. She's dehydrated, Marisol noted, but her heart rate is steady. Let's get some fluids started. She moved to prepare an IV line, her movements quick and precise. You said Cade Outfitters. They're not supposed to use animals under 18 months for pack training. She can't be more than 6 months old, Hoyt said, watching as Marisol inserted the 4 with gentle skill. Good call, bringing her in. Marisol continued her examination, running her hands along the puppy's flanks. She paused, frowning. There's something. She reached for a handheld scanner. Let's check for a microchip. The scanner beeped, and Marisol's frown deepened. She moved it again, and it beeped a second time. That's strange. I'm getting 2 different readings. 2 chips? Yes, and that's not standard practice. She made some notes on a chart. Hold her still for me. Marisol parted the fur along the puppy's shoulder blade, revealing a small, partially healed puncture mark. Look at this. Sedation scar. Recent. And here's another. She pointed to a similar mark near the neck. Multiple sedations in a young puppy. This isn't right. She moved to her computer, typing in the chip numbers. These numbers. They're in conflict. One's registered to a breeder in Idaho, the other to Cade Outfitters. But the dates don't make sense. According to this, she's simultaneously 3 years old and 6 months old. Hoyt felt a chill that had nothing to do with the clinic's air conditioning. Could it be a mistake? Microchip errors don't happen like this, Marisol said firmly. Someone deliberately implanted a second chip. The question is why? She turned to face him fully. Hoyt, this goes beyond overloading a pack animal. These are signs of something systematic. Before Hoyt could respond, his phone buzzed. The number was from the sheriff's department. McCrae, he answered. Ranger McCrae. Captain Del Orson's voice carried its usual mixture of authority and condescension. I need you to come down to the station. Now. I'm in the middle of... Now, McCrae. That's an order. The line went dead. Hoyt looked at Marisol, who had heard enough to understand. Go, she said. I'll take care of her. Document everything. Thanks, Doc. He hesitated at the door. If Cade shows up, I know how to handle bullies. Marisol cut him off, her voice steel under silk. Trust me. The sheriff's station was a modern building that seemed out of place among the town's older architecture. Captain Orson was waiting in his office, his bulk filling the space behind his desk, mirrored aviator sunglasses reflecting Hoyt's approach. Sit down, Orson commanded, not looking up from the paper in front of him. Hoyt remained standing. What's this about, Captain? Orson finally looked up, removing his sunglasses with deliberate slowness. You've managed to step in it this time, McCrae. I have here a formal complaint from Elliot Rook himself. You know who that is? County Commissioner, real estate developer, and majority stakeholder in half the businesses that keep this county alive, including Cade Outfitters. Orson tapped the paper. This is an official reprimand for interference with commerce. You seized private property without proper authority. I intervened in a case of animal cruelty, Hoyt corrected. Well within my jurisdiction. Your jurisdiction? Orson laughed, a harsh sound. You're a seasonal ranger, McCrae. You direct traffic and give nature talks to tourists. Leave law enforcement to actual law enforcement. Like you? Hoyt kept his voice neutral, but the implication hung in the air. Orson's face reddened. Watch yourself. This reprimand goes in your permanent file. One more incident, and you'll be looking for work elsewhere. Far elsewhere. He slid the paper across the desk. Sign it. Hoyt picked up the reprimand, read it carefully. No. Excuse me? I said no. I'll take the reprimand, but I won't sign anything admitting wrongdoing when I was doing my job. Orson stood, his chair scraping against the floor. You think you're some kind of hero? This isn't about one puppy. This is about knowing your place in the food chain. You're right, Hoyt agreed, quietly. It's not about one puppy. It's about doing what's right, even when it's not convenient. He turned and walked out, leaving the unsigned reprimand on Orson's desk. His hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. Years in the army had taught him to recognize when he was in the crosshairs, and right now, every instinct was screaming danger. The veterinary clinic was dark when he returned, but Marisol's car was still in the lot. He found her in the back, reviewing x-rays on a light board. "How'd it go?" she asked without turning around. "About as well as expected." He moved to stand beside her. "How is she?" "Resting. I've documented everything. The sedation marks, the conflicting chips, her actual age versus the forged papers." She turned to face him. "Hoyt, what they're doing. It's not just cruel. It's organized. The level of documentation falsification, the professional sedation marks. This isn't some local operation cutting corners." "I know." He rubbed his face tiredly. "But Cade's got the county wrapped up tight. Orson just made that clear." Marisol touched his arm, her hand warm and steady. "Then we go higher. I have contacts at the state level, people who investigate animal trafficking. This could be the thread that unravels something bigger." "It'll get ugly," he warned. "It's already ugly," she countered. "Question is, are you willing to see it through?" Hoyt looked through the office window to where the puppy slept peacefully in a recovery kennel. He thought about Cade's threats, Orson's warnings, the comfortable life he could have if he just looked the other way. Then he thought about all the other animals out there, suffering in silence. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'm in." Marisol smiled, fierce and determined. "Good. Because I've already started making calls. Whatever's going on here, we're going to expose it. Together." The puppy stirred in her sleep, tail wagging slightly at some pleasant dream. Looking at her, Hoyt felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. The certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the canyon trails as Hoyt made his routine patrol. His mind kept drifting back to the puppy and the disturbing evidence Marisol had uncovered. Something bigger was happening here, but he couldn't quite piece it together. A movement caught his eye. Someone leading a horse down one of the maintenance paths. He recognized the lean figure of Nerida Klein, one of Cade's wranglers. She was looking over her shoulder repeatedly, her movements hesitant. As Hoyt approached, she startled visibly. "Ranger McCrae, I need to talk to you." Her voice trembled slightly, and Hoyt noticed dark circles under her eyes. He dismounted, keeping his movements slow and careful. "I'm listening." Nerida glanced around again before speaking in a low voice. "That puppy you took? It's not the first. Not even close." "What do you mean?" "The tourist treks. They're just a cover." She wrapped her arms around herself, despite the warm day. "Every week, puppies disappear. They swap them out when they get too tired or hurt. Nobody ever sees what happens to them after." Hoyt's stomach tightened. "How long has this been going on?" "Since I started working there, at least. 2 years. Nerida's hands twisted in her horse's reins. "I needed the job. Tried to tell myself it wasn't my business. But after what you did," she took a shaky breath. "There's more. Way more than anyone knows." "Tell me everything," Hoyt said quietly. Over the next 30 minutes, Nerida painted a picture that made Hoyt's blood run cold. Cade's operation wasn't just about overworking pack animals. It was an elaborate scheme involving dozens of puppies, fake papers, and mysterious nighttime deliveries. "They use the maintenance trails after dark," Nerida explained. "Big horse trailers, but they're not moving horses. I've seen them heading up toward the old Weber property, but it's supposed to be empty since the government bought it." Hoyt knew the place, a remote parcel of land that had been incorporated into the Federal Preserve last year. "You're sure about this?" Nerida nodded. "Tonight. They've got 3 deliveries scheduled, around 11 o'clock. She started to say more, then tensed as voices carried up the trail. "I have to go. Please. Be careful. Cade has people everywhere." She hurried away, leaving Hoyt with a decision to make. Going in alone would be foolish, but he knew most local law enforcement was in Cade's pocket. He needed someone he could trust. 20 minutes later, He pulled up to a small ranch house set back from the main road. A weather-beaten sign reading Ridge Wildlife Rehabilitation creaked in the wind. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Tamsin Ridge stood there, a hawk feather woven into her dark braid, sharp eyes taking in his expression. "You look like you're about to do something stupid and need backup." Despite everything, Hoyt smiled. "How'd you guess?" "Because that's the only time anyone comes to visit me." She stepped aside to let him in. "Come on, tell me what kind of trouble you're stirring up." Inside, Hoyt laid out everything: the puppy, the evidence Marisol found, and Nerida's revelation. Tamsin listened without interrupting, absently stroking the wing of an injured owl perched nearby. "Weber property, huh?" she finally said. "Makes sense. It's federal land now, but the old access roads are still there. Perfect spot if you don't want visitors." She stood up. "I've got some night vision equipment from tracking injured wildlife. Give me 10 minutes to gear up." "You don't have to get involved," Hoyt warned. Tamsin fixed him with a stern look. "Hoyt McCrae, I've been waiting 5 years for someone to finally take on Bromley Cade. Don't you dare try to leave me out of this." At 10:45, that night, they were positioned on a ridge, overlooking the old Weber access road. True to Nerida's word, 3 large horse trailers appeared, moving slowly with their lights off. "They're not even trying to be subtle," Tamsin whispered, adjusting her night vision binoculars. "They must feel pretty secure out here." Hoyt watched through his own pair as the trailers wound their way up to what had once been the Weber family's barn. The structure was supposed to be abandoned, but warm light spilled from its windows. They moved closer, using the scrub brush for cover. The sounds hit them first: whimpers and barks, muffled but unmistakable. Dozens of them. "There's your proof," Tamsin breathed. Through gaps in the barn's weathered boards, they could see rows of kennels. Young dogs, mostly puppies, packed into spaces barely big enough to turn around. Workers were unloading more from the trailers, checking papers and updating charts on clipboards. "This is organized," Hoyt murmured. "Professional." "And illegal as hell," Tamsin added. She was documenting everything with a small camera. "This is federal land. They've got no permits, no oversight. And look at those kennels. Every animal welfare law in the book is being broken." They watched as the workers processed the new arrivals. Some puppies were marked with colored tags. Others were moved to a separate section of the barn. The efficiency of it all made Hoyt's skin crawl. "We need to get closer," he said. "Get better evidence." Tamsin grabbed his arm. "Wait. Look." A black SUV was pulling up to the barn. Even in the dim light, Hoyt recognized Bromley Cade's distinctive silhouette as he stepped out. The man moved through the facility like he owned it, checking kennels and consulting with workers. "He's not just involved," Hoyt realized. "He's running it." "And now we know why he was so upset about you taking that puppy," Tamsin said. "You didn't just interfere with his business, you threatened his whole operation." They stayed long enough to document the processing of all 3 trailers. The entire operation ran like clockwork, speaking to years of practice. When the last worker left, Cade did a final inspection before driving away. Back at Tamsin's ranch, they reviewed the photos and video footage. The evidence was damning. Clear shots of the illegal facility, the overcrowded conditions, and Cade's direct involvement. "This is bigger than animal cruelty," Tamsin said, spreading the photos across her kitchen table. "This is organized crime, money laundering, probably trafficking. No wonder he's got the local authorities in his pocket." Hoyt stared at the images, thinking about the puppy that had started all this. How many others had suffered and died in that barn? How long had this been going on while everyone looked the other way? "We can't take this to the sheriff's department," he said finally. "Not after what happened with Orson." "No," Tamsin agreed. "We need to go higher, federal level." "But Hoyt," she met his eyes seriously. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Cade won't just threaten anymore. He'll come at you with everything he's got." Hoyt looked at the photos again, at the faces of the frightened puppies in those cramped kennels. He thought about Nerida, finding the courage to speak up after 2 years of silence. About Marisol, refusing to back down even when it would have been easier. "I know," he said quietly, "but sometimes you have to decide what kind of person you're going to be." what you're willing to stand up for. Tamsin smiled, fierce and proud. Well then, partner, let's get to work. They spent the next few hours organizing the evidence and making detailed notes about everything they'd witnessed. The scope of Cade's operation was staggering, but now they had proof. The choice Hoyt had been wrestling with was clear. There was no backing down from this fight. Dawn was breaking as they finished, the first rays of sun painting the canyon, walls gold. Somewhere out there, in an abandoned barn on federal land, dozens of puppies were waiting for someone to save them. Hoyt didn't know exactly how this would end, but he knew he was on the right path. He had chosen his side. Now it was time to dig deeper. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Dr. Rind, Marisol Vega's mobile veterinary clinic. As she hunched over her laptop, dark circles under her eyes betraying a sleepless night. Empty coffee cups littered her desk, testament to the hours she'd spent digging through databases and making calls. "This can't be right," she muttered, double-checking the sequence of numbers on her screen against her handwritten notes. But there was no mistake. The second microchip number she'd found in the rescued puppy matched perfectly with a Federal Emergency Management Agency database entry. Her phone buzzed. Hoyt. She'd texted him an hour ago asking him to come by. "You need to see this," she said when he walked in, not even bothering with hello. "Remember how that puppy had 2 chip numbers? The second one, it's registered to a FEMA search and rescue program in Oklahoma." Hoyt leaned over her shoulder, his presence steady and warm as he studied the screen. "What does that mean exactly?" Marisol pulled up another window. "These aren't just random puppies being exploited for tourist treks. They're specially bred and trained working dogs. See this?" She pointed to a training certification. "This particular bloodline is valued at over $50,000 per animal because of their search and rescue capabilities." "Stolen," Hoyt said quietly. "They're stealing federal rescue dogs. Not just stealing them. Look at the dates." Marisol clicked through several records. These dogs disappeared during their initial training phase, young enough to still be moldable, already showing promise in their abilities, but before they're fully integrated into their units. She swiveled in her chair to face him. "Hoyt, this is organized theft across state lines. They're targeting specific animals at specific times. The sedation marks I found, the switched microchips, it's all part of a system." Hoyt paced the small office, his ranger boots making soft sounds on the linoleum. "That explains the professional setup we saw at the barn. And why Cade has so much political protection. This isn't just animal abuse anymore." "No," Marisol agreed. "It's federal crime. Interstate trafficking, theft of government property, fraud." She ran a hand through her dark hair, frustrated. "But why? Why go to all this trouble for puppies?" "Money laundering," Hoyt said. "Think about it. These dogs are worth a fortune. Cade's tourist operation provides a perfect cover for moving them through the system, cleaning the money along the way. By the time they're sold, there's no trace back to the original theft." Marisol felt sick. "And the ones that don't survive the process? The ones too weak or too strong-willed to be controlled?" Hoyt's face hardened. "We both know what happens to them." They sat in heavy silence for a moment, the weight of it all settling around them. Finally, Marisol spoke. "We can't take this to Sheriff Orson. Not after how he handled the reprimand." "No," Hoyt agreed. "The local authorities are too tangled up in Cade's web. We need to go federal." Marisol nodded slowly. "I have contacts at the FEMA training center. People who've been looking for these dogs. And you're a federal employee, even if seasonal. We can bypass the local chain of command entirely." "It's risky," Hoyt warned. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Cade will know exactly where it came from." Marisol stood up, squaring her shoulders. "I don't care. I've spent my whole career watching people hurt animals and get away with it because they had money or connections. Not this time." She saw something shift in Hoyt's eyes. Respect, maybe even admiration. It made her heart beat a little faster. "Okay," he said. "Let's do this right." He pulled out his phone. "I have a friend in the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. She works with K-9 units. If we document everything properly, build an airtight case. They spent the next several hours organizing their evidence. Marisol's medical records and photos of the sedation marks, the conflicting microchip numbers and database records, Hoyt's documentation of the hidden kennel facility, statements from Nerida about the pattern of disappearing puppies. "Look at this," Marisol said, pulling up another record. The timing of when puppies vanish from Cade's tourist treks matches perfectly with when new shipments arrive at high-end breeding facilities in 3 different states. All cash purchases, all with paperwork that looks perfect on the surface, but can be traced back to stolen FEMA dogs if you know what you're looking for, Hoyt finished. "This is good, Marisol. This is exactly what we need." She began composing emails to her contacts at FEMA, careful to detail everything they'd discovered. Hoyt made calls, speaking in low, urgent tones about interstate trafficking and organized crime. The sun was setting by the time they finished, casting long shadows across the clinic floor. Marisol's eyes were burning from staring at screens all day, but she felt energized. They were finally doing something that mattered. "My contact says a federal task force can be here within 48 hours, Hoyt said, hanging up his phone. "They're taking this seriously. They should. This isn't just about the dogs anymore." Marisol saved one final document and closed her laptop. "This is about corruption, about people in power thinking they can get away with anything." Hoyt nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Well, they picked the wrong puppy to abuse this time." Marisol couldn't help but smile. When she'd first met the quiet, reserved ranger, she never would have guessed he had this kind of fight in him. But there was steel under that calm exterior, the kind that bent but never broke. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait. Keep gathering evidence, but carefully. The feds want us to maintain normal routines, not tip our hand." He looked at her seriously. "Cade's going to figure out something's wrong soon. When he does, I can handle myself," Marisol assured him. "I've dealt with bullies before. Still, be careful, please." The concern in his voice made her breath catch. "You too," she said softly. "This is bigger than either of us expected." They shared a long look, something unspoken passing between them. Then Hoyt straightened his ranger hat and headed for the door. "I'll check in tomorrow. Keep your phone close." Marisol watched him go, already missing his steady presence. But the fire of purpose burned bright inside her. They had the truth now, and evidence to back it up. Justice was coming for Bromley Cade and his operation. She just hoped they were ready for whatever happened next. The morning sun hadn't yet crested the canyon walls when Hoyt met Nerida at the old fire lookout tower. Her hands shook slightly as she accepted the small recording device he offered. "It's waterproof and shock resistant," he explained, showing her how to activate it. "The battery will last 12 hours. Just clip it inside your jacket." Nerida turned the device over in her weathered hands. "Never thought I'd be playing secret agent at my age," she said with a weak smile. Her usual confident demeanor had given way to nervous energy. "You don't have to do this," Hoyt reminded her. "We can find another way." "No," Nerida squared her shoulders. "I've watched too many animals suffer while keeping my mouth shut. Besides, I already called his office. Made a big show about having clients with deep pockets wanting the authentic canyon experience." Tamsin, who had been quietly checking her binoculars, spoke up. "Did he bite?" "Like a hungry trout," Nerida confirmed. "Cade loves showing off to wealthy tourists, especially ones who don't ask too many questions about his operation." They spent the next hour going over the plan. Nerida would pose as a guide for fictional wealthy clients, getting Cade to open up about his efficient business model. Meanwhile, Tamsin would document the dog rotation from her hidden spot above the main trail, while Hoyt monitored from another vantage point. "Remember," Hoyt said, "we need him to specifically mention the dog switching. The more detailed he gets about his operation, the better." "I know how to get him talking," Nerida assured them. "Cade loves bragging about his perfect system to people he thinks are impressed by it." Tamsin handed Nerida a burner phone. "Text us if anything feels wrong. We'll have units staged nearby." The sun was higher now, painting the canyon walls in shades of amber and rose. Nerida took a deep breath and straightened her trail guide vest. "Well, wish me luck." "Be careful," Hoyt said quietly, They watched her drive away in her dusty pickup, then moved to their own positions. Hoyt found a sheltered spot overlooking the main trail junction, while Tamsin set up her surveillance equipment on a higher ridge. The morning crawled by. Hoyt watched several tourist groups pass below, noting how the young dogs struggled under their heavy packs. His jaw clenched at the sight, but he forced himself to focus on documentation rather than intervention. Around 11 o'clock, his radio crackled. "Target approaching," Tamsin whispered. "Black SUV. Heading for the VIP lot." Hoyt raised his binoculars. Through them, he saw Bromley Cade step out of his vehicle, dressed in his usual expensive Western wear. Nerida was already waiting by the trailhead. "Recording is live," he murmured into his radio, knowing Nerida would hear through her earpiece. The next hour was tense as they listened to Nerida leading Cade along the trail, skillfully playing the role of an impressed potential partner. She asked all the right questions about his operation's efficiency. "The secret," they heard Cade say, his voice full of smug pride, "is perfect turnover. Most outfitters waste time and money training older dogs. But young ones? They're like blank slates. Work them hard for a few weeks, then rotate them out while they're still fresh." "And your suppliers can keep up with that demand?" Nerida asked innocently. Cade laughed. "Let's just say I have connections. Very reliable ones. The paperwork's always perfect, and nobody asks questions when the money's right." Hoyt's hands tightened on his binoculars. It was exactly what they needed. But Nerida wasn't done. "What about the dogs that are rotated out?" she pressed. "Seems like a waste of good animals." "Oh, there's always a market for well-trained dogs," Cade replied smoothly. "Especially ones with the right pedigree. Our turnover system means everyone profits. The suppliers get their cut, we get maximum work hours during peak season, and certain buyers get exactly what they're looking for." Through his binoculars, Hoyt could see Tamsin photographing the exchange from her position. Her camera caught every detail, the way Cade gestured expansively, his proprietary smile, the calculated gleam in his eyes as he sized up a potential conspirator. "Fascinating system," Nerida said, her voice steady despite what they were hearing. "And local authorities don't give you any trouble?" Cade's laugh was cold. "Let's just say I have friends in all the right places. Makes everything run much smoother." The conversation continued as they made their way along the trail. Cade grew increasingly candid, describing how they sedated difficult dogs, how they falsified training certificates, how they moved animals across state lines using legitimate shipping companies as cover. Every word was another nail in his coffin, and he didn't even know it. Meanwhile, Tamsin's camera documented the ongoing activity below. Young dogs stumbling under excessive loads. Handlers roughly correcting tired puppies. The systematic abuse happening in plain sight, protected by money and influence. After what seemed like hours, the tour concluded. They listened as Cade made his final sales pitch to Nerida about partnership opportunities. "I'll definitely be in touch," Nerida assured him. "My clients will be very interested in your efficient approach." Once Cade's SUV disappeared down the access road, Hoyt and Tamsin converged on Nerida's position. Her hands were shaking as she removed the recording device. "You did it," Hoyt said quietly, carefully storing the device in an evidence bag. "You were incredible." "Got him spelling out the whole operation," Tamsin agreed, checking through her photos. "The federal prosecutors are going to love this." Nerida sat heavily on a boulder, the adrenaline clearly wearing off. "He's so casual about it all," she said, "like he's describing a normal business, not systematic animal abuse and theft." "That's what will help bring him down," Hoyt assured her. "His own arrogance. He never imagined anyone would dare challenge his operation." They spent the next hour carefully cataloging and backing up their evidence. Tamsin's photos clearly showed the progression of exhausted puppies throughout the day. The audio recording captured every damning word of Cade's perfect system. Combined with their previous evidence, it painted an undeniable picture of organized criminal activity. "What happens now?" Nerida asked as they finished. "Now we get this to the federal task force," Hoyt said. "They've been building their case, waiting for exactly this kind of evidence. Proof of interstate trafficking, admission of document fraud, Confirmation of local corruption. He'll know it was me, Nerida said quietly. We'll protect you, Tamsin promised. You're a key witness now. The feds will make sure you're safe. Hoyt nodded. You've done something incredibly brave today, Nerida. You've given us exactly what we needed to stop this. The sun was setting now, painting the canyon in deep shadows. Somewhere below, more puppies were being worked to exhaustion on the trails. But for the first time since this began, Hoyt felt real hope. They had proof. They had momentum. Justice was finally within reach. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the ranger station when Captain Del Orson's cruiser pulled up, kicking dust across the weathered wooden steps. Hoyt watched through the window as Orson climbed out, followed by Bromley Cade in his signature pressed suit and polished boots. 2 more patrol cars arrived, lights flashing. Hoyt's stomach tightened. This wasn't a casual visit. The door banged open. Orson filled the frame, mirrored sunglasses reflecting Hoyt's own tense expression. Ranger McCrae, hand over your badge and service weapon. On what grounds? Hoyt kept his voice steady. Cade stepped forward, a predatory smile playing across his face. Multiple counts of interference with legitimate business operations, harassment, defamation, and that's just the beginning. You've been conducting an unauthorized investigation, Orson added, outside your jurisdiction and authority, making false accusations against a respected business owner. Hoyt's jaw clenched. Everything I've done is documented and legal. We'll let the review board sort that out. Orson gestured to his deputies. Clear out his locker. Box up his personal effects. As the officers began methodically dismantling his workspace, Hoyt felt the weight of years of service being stripped away. Photos, notebooks, the small touches that made this station his home, all tossed carelessly into cardboard boxes. Your suspension is effective immediately, Orson continued. You'll receive formal notice of the disciplinary hearing. Until then, you're barred from all park facilities. Cade watched the proceedings with obvious satisfaction. I tried to handle this reasonably, McCrae. Remember that. You chose to make it difficult. Hoyt unclipped his badge, the metal warm from his body heat. 7 years of protecting these trails, these animals, these wild places, reduced to this moment. He placed it on the desk alongside his service weapon. You know what's really happening here, he said quietly. What's happening, Orson cut in, is you're being removed from a position you've proven unfit for. Now clear out before I add trespassing charges. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Other rangers, maintenance workers, even some regular hikers, all watching as Hoyt was escorted from the station. He kept his head high, but each step felt like walking through deep mud. Let this be a lesson, Orson announced to the onlookers. The sheriff's department won't tolerate unauthorized vigilante actions, even from its own officers. The public humiliation was calculated, Hoyt knew. A message to anyone else who might consider challenging Cade's operation. He drove straight to Marisol's mobile clinic to warn her. The converted RV was parked in its usual spot near the visitor center, surrounded by the familiar collection of crates and medical supplies. Inside, he found her examining Lark, the rescued puppy who had started all this. They're retaliating, he told her, explaining what had happened. You need to be careful. They'll come after you next. Marisol's dark eyes flashed with anger. Let them try. I've documented every injury, every sign of abuse. The evidence doesn't disappear just because they suspended you. Lark pressed against her leg, tail wagging despite everything he'd been through. The pup's resilience gave Hoyt strength. We should move him somewhere safer, Hoyt suggested. Cade won't stop until he gets him back. He's evidence, Marisol agreed. But he's also just a puppy who needs protection. We can't let them… A sharp crack interrupted her. The clinic's window exploded inward, showering them with safety glass. Lark yelped in terror. Get down! Hoyt pulled Marisol behind an examination table as more rocks smashed through windows. Dark figures moved outside, at least 4 men in dark clothes. The back door, Marisol whispered. It locks from the inside. But they were too late. The door burst open with a screech of torn metal. 2 men rushed in, heading straight for Lark's carrier. The puppy was barking frantically now. Hoyt launched himself forward, tackling the nearest intruder. They crashed into a stack of supplies, medical equipment clattering around them. He caught a glimpse of Marisol swinging a metal tray at the second man, buying time as she tried to reach Lark. The man beneath Hoyt drove an elbow into his ribs. Pain exploded through his side. They grappled in the confined space, knocking over more equipment, neither willing to give ground. Marisol had reached Lark, but the second attacker grabbed her arm. She cried out in pain but didn't let go of the carrier. "Just take the mutt and go," one of the men outside shouted. "Hurry up!" Hoyt managed to get his arm around his opponent's neck, applying pressure to the carotid artery like his army training had taught him. The man's struggles weakened. Marisol kicked backward, catching her attacker in the knee. He cursed and stumbled, giving her the opening to swing the carrier like a weapon. It connected with his head with a solid thunk. More voices outside, car engines starting. "Forget it! Let's go!" The man Hoyt was holding went limp. He released his grip and scrambled to his feet as the second attacker retreated, holding his bleeding head. They disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a scene of destruction. Marisol was shaking but upright, still clutching Lark's carrier. The puppy whimpered and licked her hand through the grate. "Are you hurt?" Hoyt asked, moving carefully through the wreckage to reach her. She shook her head. "Just bruised. Lark's okay too." Her voice hardened. They were trying to steal him back, destroy the evidence. "They're escalating," Hoyt said grimly, examining the torn doorframe. "Physical intimidation now. We need to call the police." "The same police who just suspended you? Who work for Orson?" Marisol carefully set down the carrier and began checking Lark for injuries. "They won't help us." She was right. They were on their own now. "We need somewhere safe," Hoyt said. "For you and Lark both. They'll try again." Marisol straightened, her expression determined despite the fear he could see in her eyes. "I know a place. Off-grid cabin belonging to a rescue contact. No one knows about it. They worked quickly to salvage what they could from the destroyed clinic. Essential medical supplies, records, and evidence were packed into Hoyt's truck. Lark watched from his carrier, unusually subdued. "They're getting desperate," Marisol said as they finished loading. "That means we're close to exposing them." Hoyt nodded, scanning the darkness for any sign of their attackers returning. "But it also means they're dangerous. No more taking chances." They drove through the night, following back roads to avoid being followed. Lark eventually fell asleep, but Hoyt and Marisol remained alert, watching for headlights behind them, processing how quickly everything had escalated. The attack had made it clear. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. Lives were at stake now. Their enemies had shown they were willing to use violence to protect their operation. But they had also shown something else: fear. Cade and his people were afraid of what Hoyt and his allies had uncovered, and that fear made them vulnerable. The question was, could they gather enough evidence to bring them down before someone got seriously hurt? Or worse? The dark road stretched ahead as Hoyt drove, each mile taking them further from the destruction behind them. But he knew they couldn't run forever. Eventually, they would have to stand and fight. Dawn was breaking when they reached the safe house, a rustic cabin nestled among towering pines. As Hoyt carried boxes of evidence inside, his mind raced, connecting dots that had been nagging at him for days. The microchip discrepancies, the weekly dog rotations, the inflated Trek prices, Cade's extensive paperwork. It all pointed to something bigger than simple animal abuse. Inside the cabin's main room, Marisol spread their collected evidence across a weathered oak table. Veterinary records, photos, Nerida's audio recordings, and financial documents Tamsin had managed to copy. "Look at this," Hoyt said, laying out bank statements. "These heritage Treks, they're charging $5,000 per person. That's way above market rate." Marisol frowned, leaning closer. "For a basic canyon tour, that's impossible." "Exactly." Hoyt began arranging the papers in chronological order. "But people are paying it. Lots of people. The money's flowing through multiple accounts, then disappearing into shell companies." Lark padded over, pressing against Hoyt's leg. The puppy's presence reminded him of where this all started. One overloaded animal on a canyon rim. But now he was seeing the bigger picture. "The dogs aren't just props for overpriced tours. he said slowly. They're part of a laundering operation. The Treks provide a legitimate-looking front for dirty money. Marisol picked up a stack of shipping manifests. These arrival dates for new dogs. They match perfectly with when others disappeared. They're cycling them through on purpose. And look at the origins, Hoyt pointed to addresses, across multiple states. These aren't local strays. They're being trafficked across state lines. He spread out more documents, his hands shaking slightly as the full scope became clear. FEMA certifications, search and rescue registries, police canine training programs. These are working dogs being stolen from government agencies. That explains the professional sedation marks, Marisol said. And why they're so well trained despite their age. She scratched behind Lark's ears. You were meant to save lives, weren't you, girl? Hoyt paced the room, energy building as the pieces fell into place. This isn't just Cade's operation. He's part of a larger network. The dogs are stolen from federal programs, smuggled across state lines, used to launder money through fake tourism, then disposed of before they can be traced. That's why they were so desperate to get Lark back, Marisol realized. She's not just evidence of animal cruelty. She's proof of organized crime. RICO violations, Hoyt said. Racketeering, interstate trafficking, money laundering. This is federal territory now. He turned to face Marisol, his expression grim but determined. No wonder local law enforcement wouldn't touch it. They're either bought off or scared off. Lark whined softly, sensing their tension. Marisol knelt to comfort her, while Hoyt continued connecting evidence. The tourist treks are brilliant cover, he said. Who questions rich people paying too much for authentic experiences? The dogs make it seem legitimate while laundering the money. By the time anyone might investigate, the animals are gone, and the paper trails buried in tourism receipts. But why working dogs specifically? Marisol asked. Why not just use regular strays? Training, Hoyt replied. These dogs are already conditioned to follow commands, carry equipment, work in teams, perfect for the treks. Plus, they're valuable, tens of thousands of dollars in training invested in each one. That value helps justify the inflated trek prices. He gathered the most damning evidence into a separate pile. This is bigger than we thought, way bigger. We're not just dealing with a corrupt local outfitter anymore. This is organized crime with interstate reach. Marisol stood, her face set with determination. So what do we do? Local law enforcement is compromised. We can't trust them. We go federal, Hoyt said firmly. FBI, D, whoever has jurisdiction. Many government agencies being robbed of trained dogs. They'll want to know. It's dangerous, Marisol warned. These people have already shown they'll use violence. If we're right about how big this is, we don't have a choice, Hoyt cut in. Look at Lark. How many other dogs like her are being abused right now? How many vital programs are being robbed of trained animals? We have to stop it. The puppy looked up at them with trusting eyes, unaware she represented proof of a criminal enterprise spanning multiple states. Her presence had led them to uncover something far darker than they'd initially suspected. We'll need protection, Marisol said. Somewhere secure to compile everything for the feds. And we'll need more proof, something that definitively links the stolen dogs to the money laundering. Hoyt nodded, already planning. Tamsin can help with the financial records, and Nerida might be able to get more recordings now that we know what to listen for. I can cross-reference medical records with reported thefts from working dog programs, Marisol added. Build a pattern of when and where they're being stolen. They work through the morning, organizing evidence and building their case. The cabin filled with papers, photos, and digital files. A paper trail leading to something much bigger than local corruption. Lark dozed nearby, occasionally waking to check on them. Her presence was a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. Not just one rescued puppy, but an entire system of abuse and crime that needed to be exposed. As the sun climbed higher, Hoyt felt a mix of dread and determination. They were in deep now, facing an organized criminal enterprise instead of just a corrupt local businessman. But they had something their opponents didn't. Solid evidence and the moral high ground. The stakes had risen dramatically. This wasn't just about saving animals anymore. It was about bringing down a criminal network that spanned state lines and corrupted local officials. They were David facing Goliath, armed with nothing but truth and determination. But sometimes, Hoyt reminded himself as he watched Lark sleeping peacefully, that was enough. Sometimes the truth, backed by evidence and courage, was the strongest weapon of all. Hoyt McCrae surveyed the canyon from his hidden vantage point, noting how the late afternoon shadows stretched across the rugged terrain. Through his binoculars, he watched another of Cade's freight trucks wind its way along the narrow service road. Something had to give, and soon. "Position 3 is set." Tamsin's voice crackled through his radio. She'd been helping him place surveillance cameras at strategic points along the canyon's freight routes all morning. "Copy that," Hoyt replied softly. "How's the angle?" "Perfect. Clear view of the loading zone and the side trail they've been using." He made a note on his topographical map, marking the third camera position. They now had eyes on every major access point Cade's operation used. The cameras were small, solar-powered, and well hidden, the kind used for tracking wildlife. Nobody would look twice if they spotted one. Marisol's voice came through next. "I've got the last of the climbing gear secured at the north rim." Hoyt smiled grimly. The ropes were their insurance policy, quick escape routes if things went bad, but also a way to cut off Cade's people if they tried to run. He'd spent years exploring these canyons. He knew every handhold and hidden path. "Good work, both of you," he said. "Head back to the rendezvous point. Our FBI contacts should be there soon." The meeting location was a remote ranger station, officially closed for renovations. Perfect cover for gathering without drawing attention. Hoyt packed up his gear and made his way there, taking an indirect route out of habit. Agent Sarah Chen was waiting when he arrived, along with her partner, Agent Marcus Torres. They'd driven up from the Phoenix field office in an unmarked SUV. "Mr. McCrae," Chen greeted him with a firm handshake. "Walk us through what you've set up." Hoyt spread his map across the station's worn desk. Red dots marked camera positions, blue lines showed the climbing rope placements, and yellow highlighted Cade's known routes. "We've got eyes on every major access point," he explained, pointing to each location. "The cameras are movement, activated and upload to a secure cloud server. Even if they're found and destroyed, we'll have the footage." Torres nodded approvingly. "Smart. What about these rope positions?" "Emergency exits if needed, but also choke points. If Cade's people try to run, they'll find their usual escape routes blocked. They'll have to use the main roads, where you can be waiting." "You know this terrain well," Chen observed. "Been working it for years," Hoyt replied simply. "Learned every trail and shortcut." Marisol and Tamsin arrived as they were discussing strategy. Hoyt made introductions. Then they got down to planning the sting operation. "We need hard evidence linking the stolen dogs to the money laundering," Chen explained. "Proof that can't be explained away as misunderstandings or paperwork errors." "Nerida's recordings help," Tamsin said. "But we need more." Hoyt pointed to several spots on the map. "These are their main loading zones. If we can catch them actually transferring dogs." "Too risky," Torres cut in. "They're careful about those transfers. We need something more concrete." "What about the financial records?" Marisol suggested. "I've been cross-referencing dates of known dog thefts with their trek bookings. There's a pattern." Chen leaned forward, interested. "Show me." Marisol pulled out her laptop and opened a spreadsheet. "See these spikes in their heritage trek bookings? They align perfectly with reports of missing search and rescue dogs from federal programs. The prices they charge for these treks are way above market rate, perfect for laundering money." "Good work," Chen said. "But we need to catch them in the act. A paper trail isn't enough. They'll claim accounting errors." Hoyt studied the map thoughtfully. "What if we could force their hand? Make them move multiple dogs at once?" "How?" Torres asked. "Create a bottleneck. Close some of their usual routes for maintenance. They'll have to consolidate shipments." Hoyt traced a path with his finger. "Force them to use this road. It's the only one that could handle their freight trucks." Chen exchanged looks with her partner. "That could work. Concentrate their operation where we can monitor it." They spent the next hour planning the details. The FBI would position agents disguised as road maintenance crews, closing alternative routes. Hoyt's cameras would track movement, while his climbing ropes prevented escape through the backcountry. One thing, Torres warned as they wrapped up. This has to be perfect. These people have connections. One mistake, and they'll slip away. Maybe for good. Hoyt nodded grimly. Understood. After the agents left, he stayed behind with Marisol and Tamsin, double-checking every detail of their preparations. The sun was setting, painting the canyon walls in deep oranges and reds. "You okay?" Marisol asked softly. "Yeah," Hoyt replied, still studying the map. "Just want to make sure we haven't missed anything." "We haven't," Tamsin assured him. "The cameras are well hidden, the ropes are secure, and we've thought through every angle." He knew they were right, but the stakes felt overwhelming. They weren't just trying to save a few dogs anymore. They were attempting to bring down an organized criminal enterprise with tentacles reaching into local government. "I keep thinking about Lark," Marisol said, as if reading his thoughts. "How many others like her are out there? How many good dogs, trained to help people, are being abused for profit?" Her words strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just about one puppy anymore. It was about exposing corruption, about standing up for what was right even when the odds seemed stacked against them. Hoyt rolled up the map and tucked it away. "Get some rest," he told them. "Tomorrow we start closing those alternate routes. Things will move fast after that." As they left the ranger station, he took one last look at the canyon. Somewhere out there, Cade's operation was still running, still trafficking stolen dogs, still laundering money through fake tourism. But now they had a plan. Now they had federal backing. Now they had a chance to shut it all down. The cameras were watching, the ropes were set, and the FBI was ready. All they needed was for Cade's organization to make one wrong move, just one mistake, and the whole house of cards would come tumbling down. Hoyt climbed into his truck, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They couldn't afford to fail. Too many lives, human and canine, depended on getting this right. The pre-dawn air hung crisp and still over the canyon as Hoyt positioned himself behind an outcropping. His radio crackled softly with check-ins from the FBI teams stationed along the bottlenecked route. Through his binoculars, he watched the first hints of sunrise paint the eastern sky in pale gold. "Movement at checkpoint 3. Torres's voice came through quietly. "Large horse trailer approaching from the south access road." Hoyt adjusted his position, heart pounding. After a week of blocking alternative routes, their patience was finally paying off. He'd suspected Cade's operation would be forced to consolidate their shipments through this main road. "Visual confirmation," Chen reported. "White Ford F-350 with a silver double-axle trailer. Matches the description from Nerida's intel." Through his binoculars, Hoyt caught sight of the approaching vehicle. Its headlights cut through the lingering darkness as it wound its way up the canyon road. The trailer swayed slightly, clearly carrying a heavy load. "Ready at blockade point," another agent confirmed. Hoyt's hand tightened on his radio as he watched the truck approach the strategic choke point they'd created. Concrete barriers narrowed the road to a single lane, with FBI vehicles disguised as maintenance equipment positioned to spring into action. The truck slowed as it reached the construction zone. Hoyt could make out two figures in the cab, both matching descriptions of Cade's regular transporters. The driver leaned out, checking clearance. "Hold positions," Chen commanded. "Let them commit to the squeeze point." The tension was unbearable as the truck inched forward between the barriers. Hoyt's cameras captured every moment. When the vehicle reached the precise center of the trap, Chen's voice cracked through the radio. "Execute." Hidden lights blazed to life, flooding the area in harsh white brilliance. FBI vehicles roared into position, blocking both ends of the passage. Agents emerged with weapons drawn, surrounding the surprise transporters. "Federal agents! Hands where we can see them!" The driver and passenger complied immediately, clearly shocked by the overwhelming show of force. As they were secured and cuffed, Hoyt joined the team approaching the trailer. The sound hit them first, whines and barks from inside. When they opened the rear doors, the stench of fear and confinement washed over them. Packed inside were 11 dogs of various breeds, all wearing training vests and harnesses identifying them as service or search and rescue animals. "My God," Marisol whispered, arriving to help assess the animals. She moved through the trailer, checking each dog with gentle hands. They're dehydrated, stressed, but alive. Hoyt photographed everything: the dogs, their identification tags, the forged paperwork found in the truck's glove compartment. The documents showed a sophisticated operation, with falsified health certificates and altered registration papers. "Good work, everyone," Chen said, overseeing the collection of evidence. "This is exactly what we needed." The sunrise painted the scene in surreal colors as they worked to process the site. Animal transport vehicles arrived to safely remove the dogs. The two transporters, faced with overwhelming evidence, quickly began offering information in hopes of lighter sentences. By mid-morning, the initial euphoria of success began to fade into something more complicated. The transporters' statements led to 3 more arrests, local officials who'd been on Cade's payroll. But the man himself was nowhere to be found. "He's not at any of his known properties," Torres reported, frustration evident in her voice. "We've got teams searching, but—" Hoyt stood at the edge of the road, watching the last animal transport pull away. Something felt off. The victory seemed too clean, too easy. Cade was too smart to be caught off guard like this. "He knew," Hoyt said suddenly. "He had to have known we were watching this route." Marisol joined him, her expression troubled. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. 11 dogs, obvious paper trail, transporters who fold immediately." Hoyt ran a hand through his hair. "He sacrificed this shipment. Probably had something bigger moving through while we were focused here." Chen approached, having overheard. "You think this was a diversion?" "Makes sense," Torres added. "The transporters gave up information too easily, and all the officials they named were already under suspicion." Hoyt looked back toward the canyon, its vast expanse suddenly seeming full of hidden possibilities. "Cade's smart. He wouldn't risk his entire operation on one route. We need to—" "Hold that thought," Chen cut in, pressing her radio earpiece. Her expression darkened as she listened. "Confirmed sighting of Cade at a private airstrip 50 miles south, but by the time our people got there—" "He was gone," Hoyt finished. The morning sun now beat down fully, harsh and revealing. What had seemed like a triumphant dawn was transforming into something more complex. Yes, they'd saved 11 dogs and arrested several conspirators, but their primary target had slipped away, leaving them to wonder what they'd missed while focusing on this apparent victory. The FBI teams began breaking down their operation, processing the scene with methodical precision. Hoyt helped Marisol finish documenting the medical condition of the rescued dogs. Everyone moved with the same mixture of satisfaction and unease, proud of what they'd accomplished, but aware that their work was far from over. "We'll find him," Marisol said softly, touching Hoyt's arm. "This is still a win. Those dogs are safe because of what we did here." Hoyt nodded, trying to take comfort in that truth. They had dealt a significant blow to the operation. The evidence collected would lead to more arrests, more revelations. But as he watched the sun climb higher over the canyon walls, he couldn't shake the feeling that Cade was out there somewhere, already planning his next move. The morning wore on as they processed the scene, each piece of evidence carefully catalogued and secured. The arrested transporters were taken away for formal booking. Local media began arriving, drawn by the unusual activity and the presence of federal agents. Chen approached Hoyt one last time before departing. "Don't beat yourself up about Cade. We've got his infrastructure, his people. He's running with nothing but what he could carry." "Maybe," Hoyt replied, "but something tells me that's exactly how he planned it." The FBI teams gradually dispersed, leaving Hoyt and his allies to contemplate their bittersweet victory. They had won this battle, saved these dogs, exposed this much of the operation. But somewhere out there, Bromley Cade was free, and the larger war was far from over. The storm rolled in without warning. Dark clouds swallowing the afternoon Sunday thunder echoed off the canyon walls as Hoyt drove toward Marisol's mobile clinic. She wasn't answering her phone, and dread sat heavy in his stomach. Lightning split the sky as he pulled up to the empty parking lot. The clinic door swung open in the wind, banging against the metal frame. Inside, supplies were scattered across the floor, and examination tables were overturned. Signs of a struggle were everywhere. His heart stopped when he saw Lark's collar, torn and bloody, lying near the door. A note was pinned beneath it, written in Cade's precise handwriting. "You should have backed off when you had the chance." Hoyt's hands shook as he dialed Chen at the FBI. The phone rang endlessly before cutting to an error message. He tried Torres next, then the local dispatch. Nothing but static and automated responses. The storm wasn't helping, but this felt deliberate. He rushed to his truck and grabbed his radio, but only garbled interference came through. "This is Ranger McCrae, requesting immediate assistance at..." The radio crackled and died. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A video clip showed Marisol and Lark in the back of a vehicle, both restrained. Marisol's face was bruised, but her eyes blazed with defiance. The message below read, "Canyon Route 3. Come alone or they die." Rain pounded against the windshield as Hoyt sped toward the ranger station. He needed supplies, needed his climbing gear. The fact that he'd been stripped of his badge meant nothing now. The station was dark when he arrived, power knocked out by the storm. Working by flashlight, Hoyt gathered what he needed: ropes, first aid kit, emergency flares. His old military training kicked in as he checked his supplies with mechanical precision. A crash of thunder made him look up. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of Captain Orson's patrol car speeding past. The pieces clicked together. Orson was blocking communications, using the storm as cover. The local authorities would be getting false coordinates, the FBI diverted by manufactured jurisdictional disputes. Hoyt and his allies had underestimated how deep the corruption went. He pulled out his topographical maps, studying Route 3 by flashlight. It was one of the most treacherous paths through the canyon, especially in weather like this, perfect for someone wanting to disappear or to trap a pursuer. The rain was coming down in sheets when Hoyt reached the trailhead. Lightning illuminated the canyon in stark flashes, revealing the dangerous path ahead. Under normal circumstances, no one would attempt this route in such conditions. But circumstances were far from normal. Hoyt moved as quickly as he dared, using his knowledge of the terrain to make up time. The path grew narrower, slicker with each step. Loose rocks clattered down the cliff face, lost in the darkness below. The storm's fury increased, as if nature itself was trying to stop him. Through gaps in the clouds, he caught glimpses of tire tracks in the mud, confirming he was on the right trail. Cade was counting on the weather to slow any pursuit, probably planning to reach one of the old mining access roads on the other side. A flash of lightning revealed something ahead, fresh scrapes on a boulder where a vehicle had squeezed past. Hoyt was gaining ground. The rain couldn't wash away all traces of their passage. He rounded a bend and froze. Ahead, barely visible through the rain, was Cade's SUV, stopped at a precarious section where a recent rockslide had taken out part of the road. In the dim light, Hoyt could make out figures moving through the rain. Cade forcing Marisol forward, Lark struggling in someone else's arms. Thunder crashed overhead as Hoyt crept closer. The gap in the road was at least 15 feet across. Cade was rigging some kind of temporary bridge using metal panels from the back of his vehicle. He was betting everything on crossing before the storm brought the whole cliff down. Hoyt pressed himself against the canyon wall, inching forward in the darkness. One wrong step would send him plummeting into the void. But he had to get closer, had to find an angle that wouldn't put Marisol and Lark at risk. Lightning flashed again, and for a split second, the entire scene was illuminated in harsh detail. Marisol's determined face, Lark's terrified struggles, and Cade's cold smile as he turned, looking directly at where Hoyt stood. The thunder that followed drowned out everything else, but Hoyt could see Cade's mouth moving, issuing commands. The man holding Lark began dragging the dog toward the makeshift bridge, while Cade grabbed Marisol, using her as a shield. Rain and wind howled through the canyon as Hoyt watched them start across the gap, metal panels creaking under their weight. One wrong move, one strong gust, and they would all plummet into the darkness below. The storm's fury intensified as Hoyt tracked Cade's vehicle toward the old sawmill complex. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the rusty metal buildings in stark flashes. Through sheets of rain, he spotted movement. Cade forcing Marisol toward the cable bridge that spanned the deepest part of the gorge. A deafening crack echoed through the canyon as lightning struck the sawmill's roof. Sparks erupted from the aging structure, and flames quickly took hold despite the downpour. The orange glow cast eerie shadows across the scene. "One more step, McCrae, and I cut these cables," Cade's voice carried over the wind. He held Marisol at the bridge's center, one hand gripping a pair of industrial bolt cutters. Lark whimpered nearby, tied to the bridge railing. Hoyt's mind raced. The bridge swayed violently in the wind, its ancient supports groaning. Without hesitation, he clipped into his rappel line and launched himself off the canyon wall. His body slammed into the bridge's underside with bone-jarring force, making the entire structure shudder. Marisol seized the moment of chaos. She drove her elbow into Cade's ribs, forcing him to stumble. The bolt cutters clattered against the metal grating but caught in the safety netting. "Don't move!" Captain Orson's voice cut through the storm. He stood at the bridge's far end, gun raised. But before he could fire, headlights burst through the rain. Nerida's truck plowed into Orson's vehicle, sending him sprawling. The bridge lurched sickeningly as supports began to fail. Hoyt pulled himself up through the grating, rain stinging his face. Cade lunged for the bolt cutters, but Marisol kicked them through a gap in the bridge's floor. They disappeared into the darkness below. The flames from the sawmill cast wild shadows as the storm raged on. The bridge groaned and twisted, its cables straining against the wind and weight. They were all trapped now. Hoyt, Marisol, Lark, and Cade suspended above the abyss as the structure threatened to tear itself apart. With a sickening screech, the main cable finally snapped. The bridge lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. Despite the searing pain in his shoulder, Hoyt managed to grab a support strut with one hand while fumbling with Lark's harness with the other. "Hold on!" he shouted through gritted teeth. The puppy whimpered as he secured the clips, his fingers slipping on the wet metal. 20 feet away, Marisol scrambled toward the rocky ledge, her movements desperate but precise. The bridge twisted further, metal groaning under the strain. Cade dangled precariously from a broken section, his polished boots scraping against empty air. The flames from the sawmill cast an orange glow across his face as realization dawned. He had nowhere left to run. "I surrender," Cade's voice cracked with fear. Just get me out of here." Through the pain and exhaustion, Hoyt felt a grim satisfaction. The man who had caused so much suffering was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Behind them, the sawmill's roof collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber, marking the end of Cade's criminal empire. Marisol reached solid ground and turned back to help, her veterinarian's instincts focused first on getting Lark to safety. The puppy, still secured in the harness, looked up at Hoyt with complete trust despite the chaos around them. Through the rain-streaked dawn, FBI vehicles converged on the canyon road, their lights casting blue shadows across the wet ground. Special Agent Teresa Chen strode forward, tablet in hand, displaying the damning footage from Hoyt's hidden cameras. "We have everything," she announced, her voice carrying across the gathering crowd of local deputies and park personnel. The surveillance footage, Mrs. Klein's recordings, and a complete paper trail linking Mr. Rook's office to the operation. Hoyt watched as agents led Cade away in handcuffs, his expensive boots now caked with mud. Nearby, Rook's face had turned ashen as agents emerged from his office carrying boxes of financial records and computer drives. Captain Orson tried to bluster his way through, but fell silent when Chen played Nerida's recording of him accepting payment to block investigations. The morning newspapers would tell the full story, how a seasonal ranger's stand against animal cruelty had exposed a multi-state criminal enterprise. Marisol squeezed Hoyt's hand as they watched the arrests unfold. Lark sat alertly at their feet, her tail wagging slightly, as if she too understood that justice had finally arrived. For the first time since finding that overburdened puppy on the trail, Hoyt felt the weight lift from his shoulders. His choice to take a stand, despite the cost, had mattered after all. The healing process began in earnest once the arrests were made. At the temporary shelter, veterinarians and handlers worked tirelessly to assess and rehabilitate the rescued dogs. One by one, they were matched with certified search and rescue teams across the country, Their skills finally put to proper use, Lark's return to Fema was bittersweet. Hoyt and Marisol watched as she bounded excitedly toward her new handler, her tail wagging with pure joy. "She'll save lives now," Marisol said softly, wiping away a tear. The Park Service not only reinstated Hoyt but promoted him to lead ranger, acknowledging his courage in exposing the corruption. He and Marisol found a small house near the park, with plenty of room for her mobile vet clinic in the yard. Their family grew unexpectedly when they met Juniper, a scarred shepherd mix too timid for service work. The pup had been among those rescued but struggled to find placement due to her fearful nature. Something in her hesitant eyes spoke to both of them. "She needs someone who understands healing takes time," Marisol said, watching Juniper slowly emerge from behind Hoyt's legs. Hoyt knelt down, letting the nervous dog approach at her own pace. For the first time in years, he felt completely at peace. His solitary life as a ranger had transformed into something richer, a home filled with purpose, love, and the gentle presence of those who trusted him to protect them. "Welcome home, girl," he whispered as Juniper finally pressed her head against his hand. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.